we're playing a game where the androids are talking to the machines saying you're meaningless. The machines are talking to the androids like, why are you doing any of this? What's your point? What's your purpose? Why are you doing this? And then we're sitting down like playing a video game, which culturally
is viewed as a waste of time.
Yeah. So there's like a threefold aspect to this
right.
that goes all the way back to the player itself, where it's so fun.
What's up? Welcome back to the State of the Arc podcast. My name is Mike.
And my name's Kason.
We're here to talk about the B playthrough of NieR Automata today. That is where we played up to, is the B ending. We're not sure yet kind of whether this is going to end up being 2 or 1 episode. It could go either way. So here's the plan. If we end up going 2 episodes on this, then things will continue as regularly scheduled next week.
Yes.
If they do not, there will be a 1-week break for NieR Automata, and we will release a different thing in between. Probably end up being Pan's Labyrinth.
Pan's Labyrinth, yeah.
Which is something we've already done on Patreon, but it will be going public. Because I will not be here. I'm going to be gone for the next 12 days. So, in any case, if we get 2 out of this, then it'll just be regularly scheduled program. So, we're going to find out. So, anything you wanted to say before we get started? Right with the first thing you see in B playthrough?
No, I don't.
Nothing from last week or corrections or notes or anything like that?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
They'll just show up as we go.
Yeah, I think we're good. So I really liked the way they opened this up.
Oh, me too. With the robot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the 2 robots.
It was really good. 9S is sort of observing this behavior.
Just not caring, just watching.
Just watching.
Passively commenting.
We don't know that until after the scene kind of concludes, but it at first appears that you're taking over the role of one of the machines. So there's one machine seeming to emulate the concept of mourning over a dead brother.
Yeah.
No, you'll be fine. I'll bring you back to life. You take control of this machine as it hops over and puts some oil in a bucket, tries to pour it on the dead machine to wake him back up. Mm-hmm. And then we cut to 9S, who says, it doesn't matter how much oil you give him, little guy. You can't make a machine your brother. Now, that's not the way I expected the second half of that idea to go.
Right.
I think you would expect him to say, no matter how much oil you give him, little guy, he's not coming back to life.
Right.
Or you can't fix him or something like that. But no, it's you can't make a machine your brother. That was an interesting way of phrasing that.
It was. I feel like it's a parallel for something for the androids. I put in my notes that I was going to come back to it a little bit later, but maybe we could. Let's just talk about it a little bit later.
Okay.
I don't know if we want to go into it right now, but there's a big parallel. It's just not what 9S thinks, right?
Yeah.
But what he perceives as meaningless action, he's going to have to confront that himself.
Right.
Later in this B playthrough,
right.
I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess as sort of a prelude to where this is going here, since everyone should have finished through the B ending at this point.
Yeah.
And we talked about it a little bit even last time, that at the end of ending A, he ends up, his personality, his consciousness ends up in the machine network.
Yeah.
We sort of touched on how this is the callback to the Coca-Cola commercial, his way of sort of touching hands with the other, right? Yeah. The others, the enemies, and sort of understanding them in a way that you can't otherwise. He actually is a part of their network. And there's going to be several little sort of animated sequences in between levels and bosses throughout playthrough B, where 9S narrates sort of some of the history, the culture, the lore, the motivations, the ideals of these machines.
Kind of in between scenes, right?
Yes.
Like in between chapters.
Yeah, pretty much. And so the way I sort of interpreted this was, this is him now understanding the machines a lot better, that he's a part of their network. He sees these bits of context that you didn't otherwise. And that's kind of what B playthrough is really all about. It's about you're doing the same events, but you're now going to kind of flip the coin and see the other side of it and understand those events or interpret those events differently when you have a better view of what the machines are doing and why, and what level of consciousness they have or don't, and why are they trying to have it, and their evolution, and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So while, like we said last time, there is a lot of repeating the same areas and events and bosses and things, there actually was a bit more than even I remembered as far as divergence and new story.
Well, especially
content.
basically the whole second half.
Yeah.
Like 9S is almost completely somewhere else. And any time that in a playthrough you were kind of just doing some menial, just like the equivalent of just level grinding, you're just beating a bunch of bosses or whatever. The 9S playthrough tends to just be sped up.
Yeah, it's a lot
You're
faster.
just hearing all the dialogue. It all just goes by very quickly. And that's exemplified very well here at the very beginning. At this, what's it called? The industrial
machine factory, abandoned
machine factory. Yeah. 9S is just chilling, going through this like tunnel while all the dialogue happens, and then 2B is like, "Oh no, I need your help," and then it's like, "Boom, we got to go help her," and then come back and do whatever we're doing. I like the way that they did it, though. It's really good.
Yeah, I like it quite a lot. And like I said, even last time, first time I played the game, I didn't really appreciate B playthrough very much. I was kind of annoyed by the repetition of it. Now, I like it a lot for many reasons, but
it was just different enough.
Yeah, exactly. So after he, says that line about can't make a machine your brother, he looks up in the sky, sees the squad that 2B had come with at the beginning of the game. They're sort of approaching. He's like, okay, well, it looks like it's time. So his job is to sort of infiltrate the factory and shut down or disable all of its defense systems.
Yeah.
So that those other Yorha units can get in and take out this Goliath that they've been assigned to destroy.
You do a lot more hacking here.
Yes.
I really liked it.
Yes.
It's so fun. It's very arcade style. Even the music changes.
Yes,
It's a little like 8-bit, like kind of crunchy.
Yeah.
And you're just kind of going along just as if you're playing, I don't know, Excite Bike or something. What would a good example be? I don't really have one. But yeah, then the game
like
style
maybe
just changes.
Space Invaders or
Sure.
a shooter of that kind. Yeah.
And then it becomes very just like arcade style.
Yeah.
And super, super fun. I love it.
Yeah, I wrote that down as a note. I really like the adaptive soundtrack as you go between hacking and fighting. So it's the same music.
Yeah,
It's
same
just
music.
Sort of chip-tuned. It's not really chip-tuned. It's just, it sounds a little more, it has more square and triangular sounding
Yes.
instruments that are used. But this reminded me to bring something up that I had forgotten to talk about earlier in the game too, was it's not just here that they kind of do this. They've also introduced this kind of thing with the soundtrack with, say, this cannot continue line from all the robots. So while you're fighting Adam in that boss fight, this cannot continue is worked into the music too.
Oh,
and
interesting.
they've done that a few different times. They do really clever ways. They sort of incorporate like dialogue or some soundscape from like what's happening in the story, like kind of weaves into the music. And I like the way that they do this too with the hacking. I think it's pretty cool. And yeah, there's a lot more hacking this time. In fact, I think the only time the hacking minigame even occurred in the A playthrough was when Simone, which is the boss fight, the lady in the amusement park.
The dressed up girl, yeah.
Yeah. So when she tries to hack you, and it's more like a defense against her trying to hack you.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
But now
It's more proactive.
we're going to be using it like constantly.
Yes. Like basically every big fight.
Yeah. And this essentially allows 9S to this is like the way they're using the story as a mechanism to give you more context. Yeah. He knows more about the machines, not only because he ends up like becoming part of the network, but because he was hacking all of these enemies all along and sort of like getting data directly from them in the fights. So all the names that had before been sort of jumbled characters.
In angelic script.
Right.
Yeah.
Now they're just written in English and you just know what their names are. So, for instance, as you get to the Goliath boss here at the end of this, you learn that its name is Engels.
Engels.
And this is true for the other Goliath, same type, enemy type you fight later in the middle of the city.
Yeah.
It's just called Engels. And so this is a reference to the philosopher Friedrich Engels, who was a friend and colleague of Karl Marx. They worked together on their philosophy of Marxism. And I was really trying to find out or think of a reason why he would have named that particular enemy that name.
Well,
and this goes all the way back to our playthrough and analysis of the first NieR game, where sometimes it was quite clear why he had named something, used the reference, and sometimes it was just because he's just calling out something he liked, or just
like Wendy.
Yeah, there wasn't really a story reason. That's a story I like. I'm just going to throw that name in there.
Throw the name in.
That might be the case here.
Just to mess with people.
But the only connection that I could really find with Engels and any of the other philosophers that we know were intentional to have like a story reason for being in the game is that Engels and Marx obviously talked a lot about class disparity and ownership of private property,
property ownership rights,
things like that, right? And how this created inequality. And Simone DeBeauvoir in particular was critical of Engels, but I guess also Marx, for that being a surface level explanation of why women in particular were sort of subjugated throughout history. And she tries to say this doesn't account for other things that are really important, childbirth and just their sex in general and other things. So I may or may not talk more about that later, depending on how much, because I read the second sex.
Oh, nice.
And it's really good. There's a lot of really good stuff in there, but I don't know how much. I'm kind of overwhelmed by how much of it there is.
Yeah.
And there might end up just being that much of it that I actually use to apply to the character Simone from the game, which could have been intentional, because as Yoko Taro says, like, he claims to have not really like read this or be that educated on philosophy. Yeah. He's just like armchairing it on the toilet chairing it, reading like philosophy 101 type books to get his stuff. So that could be the case. But anyway.
So in that case, a lot of these philosophers, it's not that they would be based on the entirety of their namesake. Yeah. It is just like maybe they're based on one sentence.
Yeah.
Of what the person wrote.
Or possibly even, I'm not going to name this one yet, but there is a character in this game where it's like it's actually not embodying his idea, but rather, or how he felt about it, but rather it's showing the result of what he claimed was wrong with it, and the character is used as a figurehead of that. Whereas that character would have obviously like denounced that. Yeah, you know what I mean. So it's like his name is only there because the concept is. It says
it has something to do with the name, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they are, or that they embody it, or that they they're the antithesis of it. Yeah.
Sure, it's very loose in that sense, and so I think I don't know why. Other than the fact that DeBeauvoir calls out Engels directly in the second sex and says, like, you didn't go far enough with this. This is surface level. That's literally the only connection I can see to anything. Anybody else has an idea of why this freaking Goliath boss is called Engels? Feel free to share.
Just the connection to a factory, to like an industrial factory.
Yeah.
And then it's Engels, and he's the worker. You think of machinery as something like a slave, right? The machinery works for you, so you don't have to work. And that was at least part of Marx's. I really don't know much about Engels, but I'll just say Marx's critique of the bourgeois, what did you call it? The owner class, the elite, right? How they would get all the money, but then the workers did all the work, right? So now you've got this machine that does all the work. Probably doesn't get much of the credit, despite being the big machine that does all the work. That's what I got.
Could be.
It's like,
it fits. It works. Okay, so this more or less goes the same way, but there are a couple of differences. You actually do the hacking on the Goliath this time to take over its systems and have the missiles come back and attack it. And then when 9S kind of gets knocked down and damaged and 2B goes back out to try to finish the Goliath off, there are some machines that come at him that he sort of... It's the pod that you're controlling that sort of shoots him and fights him off, while I think 9S hacks again.
Yeah, there's a few times where 9S is kind of just unconscious, and it shows, when he's unconscious, it shows him in that kind of like hacking state, right?
Yeah.
Where there's like a little pathway, and you're just kind of like the little arrow. You just kind of got to move around.
Yeah.
But sometimes you'll hear things from the outside world. Like he would hear 2B, but it would be all garbled.
Yeah.
And then he'd wake up and realize, oh, here she is.
Yeah. And I kind of liked, too, how, and they do this a couple different times through this 9S sort of perspective playthrough, where he's, like, knocked out or otherwise disabled, and he's, like, re-engaging his systems again, like almost like he's booting up.
Yeah,
so he's like going
that.
to like the memory diagnostics and the visual systems and turning them back on one by one, kind of a thing. Which I thought was kind of cool.
I love how similar his like the way that his operating system works. I guess the way he navigates through it. How similar it is to Jurassic Park.
Yep.
When Lex is like hacking in, and it's like visual. It's a bunch of blocks. And
I remember writing down the note what she called it. It was this is a Unix system. I know this. She says.
So apparently Unix is what 9S is running on too.
I guess so. 9S has a Unix operating system.
I do have a few other notes though, just from being like introduced to this stuff again.
Yeah.
Where 2B says emotions are prohibited.
Yes.
And no ma'am either, right? Like don't call me, stop calling me ma'am.
Yeah.
I did want to make a note of this in general with the Japanese. She says this a little bit later on in the bunker as well, like stop calling me ma'am. In English, that has a different meaning than it did in Japanese. Basically, it's just san, or the honorific like suffix, like just the title, addressing somebody with a certain title. And she's saying, stop doing that, right? It doesn't have much to do with the word ma'am necessarily, but she's saying stop using honorifics and don't just say my name. Don't say to be son, just say to be. And that's what she's saying.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, honorifics would in Japanese.
Yeah.
Are I mean, obviously it's formal, but like formality is a more expected thing than it is in English per se, right?
Yeah.
Like you're just going to treat even your elder by a couple of years with
just one
respect.
Year. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Where I wouldn't call, and I guess that would be more like what the relationship of 2B and 9S is. It's like a
or a
what
stranger.
Do you call it? Like
it's just how you talk to strangers too.
What do you call it? Like the upperclassman word. Jeez, what is that?
Oh,
word?
sensei, senpai. What do you mean?
Senpai.
Senpai.
That word.
Yeah.
Right. It would be like 2B is kind of like his senpai in a way.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So he would use those honorifics with her. Ma'am still works in English.
I'm not saying it doesn't work.
Yeah, I'm not saying that either.
But I think maybe the point I'm trying to draw is that ma'am is...
it's just different.
It's gendered in a way that Japanese is not.
That's true.
And also, it's more like Miss 2B. Like Miss 2B, M-I-S-S, right? Miss 2B, that would make... Well, maybe it wouldn't make more sense. I'm not saying they translated it wrong. I'm just saying that in the Japanese... it's not gendered in particular, and it would mean something more like Miss 2B instead of... and
ma'am. I was also thinking that her insistence on not using that would be seen as maybe culturally sort of different than saying don't call me ma'am. Like don't be formal with me is a more common thing to expect an English person to do than a Japanese person, right?
Yeah.
Whereas a Japanese person would be as part of their culture, it's sort of more accepted, more expected, I guess, that you would do that. So it would be more surprising to have somebody say, don't do that. And then this also makes a little bit more sense with 9S later on, when 9S is saying, like, hey, call me Nines.
it wasn't so much because I had interpreted it earlier that she was saying like, no, I'm not, like, let's not be informal. But she's the one who initiated the informalness by saying this.
That's true.
When she says, don't call me ma'am, it's specifically saying, don't speak so formally to me. Like, in part, don't use honorifics. Whereas then NieS just tries to take it further, is the issue with NieS. Then he tries to go into, like, maybe a more slang, maybe using cutesy fake names, right? Like, she's not having any of that.
You're
but
right.
she doesn't want to speak in terms of the culture. She's kind of bucking the trend and saying, like, just don't worry about that.
Yeah, right.
So that's
that
good.
makes sense. Okay, so otherwise, things...
There's no meaning to behind what machines do.
Yes.
I love hearing these lines again.
Yes.
Right? It's really good.
Yeah, I have a new appreciation for the B playthrough. It's like, with the context you get by the end of that, it all hits different.
It does, and it feels weird, and it's like, NieS, you don't know, man. You don't know what's happening.
Right.
But I also feel kind of like the machines could, and maybe later on do, say the same thing about the androids, where it's like, why are you doing this? Like, they don't understand the androids at all.
Yeah.
Like, stop killing us. Stop it. What are you doing? And then the androids are like, you started it or whatever. Like, we're going to kill you. But both of them see the other side as kind of exhibiting meaningless behavior.
Yes.
Right? And it's really funny because this is a video game, right? Mm-hmm. We're playing a game where the androids are talking to the machines saying you're meaningless. The machines are talking to the androids like, why are you doing any of this? What's your point? What's your purpose? Why are you doing this? And then we're sitting down like playing a video game, which culturally is viewed as a waste of time. Yeah. So there's like a threefold aspect to this that goes all the way back to the player itself, where it's so funny that the machines are like, why are you doing this? Makes no sense. And then the androids are like, those machines, they don't know anything. But then we as the player are like, these video game characters, they're just doing whatever I tell them to do. But it's like, it goes all the way back to you. I think it's funny.
You could even take it a step further than that, whereas the people accusing the player of wasting their time or being meaningless, it's like, there is no meaning what is meaning anyways of life? What is purpose? What is meaning? How do you even define that? I mean, it goes up again. So.
And then those people think the critiques, if you're just a critic, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are critics doing? Like, seriously.
Yeah.
Like, what do critics do? What are they doing with their life? Like, what's the point? Oh, no, I don't like this art. Oh, no. So anyways, or I don't like what you're doing. Okay, so then you can critique the critic, and then you can critique the critique of the critic.
Yep.
It just keeps going forever.
None of it, does any of it matter? I shouldn't say none of it. Anyone. I should say, does any of it matter? That's the real question
there you
right?
go.
That we're looking at here.
Yeah. And then when he was unconscious, everything just like got all garbled, which we already talked about. But it's so interesting seeing the ending of the scene from NieS's perspective, because he's not supposed to remember this.
Yes.
So when I first talked...
I actually thought about that.
Okay, good.
I was like, would it have been better to have started in the bunker?
I thought they were going to do that.
Yeah.
Or I thought they were going to go halfway through the mission and then he would stop, or whatever it was. I thought we were going to start at a different point.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. They let us play through his, even though those memories were completely lost.
Yeah.
It's still useful because we learned some interesting things. But it's interesting that they chose to do it that way.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. I was like, wouldn't it have been more appropriate to have just started the NieS playthrough in the bunker, waking up?
Yeah.
Because he doesn't remember. But at the same time, there is added context and value in seeing it again from his perspective, where it doesn't bother me that they did it this way. I think it's fine. Me neither. But it was a thought that passed through my head, like, oh, maybe they could have started here, but whatever. I do like, though, how he's sort of standing there by the maintenance bed, telling her all the same instructions on how to like boot up and stuff. And she says something to him like, I'm fine, NieS, there's something calming about your voice. I didn't remember that in the A playthrough. It probably happened. I just didn't take note of it because...
I remember it,
it didn't seem important at the time.
Right.
Now that we know how much Tubi likes her, and then we get his thoughts about, my pulse rate is rising,
Okay, it went back
Holy
down.
crap, like, what's happening, right? He's all flattered and flustered by that. So,
but what was funny is that you got to say that in the A playthrough as 2B, but then once again, even though you're controlling NieS, you still control.
You're right.
You still get to control what 2B says.
Yes,
but you're playing as NieS.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, it was good. I thought that was interesting.
I forgot that was one of the choices.
It's one of the three: yes, no, or
your voice.
Your voice sounds soothing.
Something like that. Yeah,
which is great.
I thought it was interesting that 9S has a different operator that he reports to. It's not the same girl that 2B talks to, right?
Oh, and they're polar opposites.
Total.
So 2B's operator is like very emotional.
Yeah.
And 9S's operator is the opposite, which is funny because 9S and 2B are kind of opposite.
Yes, they're
and
like
so
foils.
they each have a voice in their mind that kind of pushes them towards like a center, you could say. Almost something like the anima or animus, right? It's almost like the opposite of what you are, that kind of speaks to you and kind of tempers you a little bit.
Yeah.
Makes you not go so far the other way and kind of brings you back, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like that was probably intentional here.
This is kind of almost like a writing one-on-one thing, too.
Yeah.
When you're going to create a cast of characters, a really good way to give you really natural moments of conflict, or at least very different perspectives, is to do this, is to match up your main character with a foil.
Yeah.
So,
and an easy way to do that is with the Enneagram or the color code or the, what do you call it, the Myers-Briggs. You can find the exact polar opposite of whatever the personality type is, and you can write a new character in that way.
Right.
And it makes for interesting
It just
moments.
makes for interesting dialogue moments in between sort of your big scenes and set pieces, even in transitory sort of like scenes or whatever, because they can all look at things from a really different perspective.
Really different,
and you can also talk to a wider audience this way.
Right,
you can have this
that's a good
character who
point.
sort of represents this whole way of thinking about things, and this one who represents this one.
Yeah.
So, in the Witcher stories and the novels, you get Dandelion as a foil to
that's right.
Geralt.
Yeah.
And you'll see this all the time, and this is how you can really create interesting dialogue between characters. And they did this with 2B and 9S. They did this with their operators. They did this with Adam and Eve. It's just all the time.
It also can create a little bit of conflict.
Yeah, conflict, which is what you need. It's what makes it interesting. Yep, exactly right. So I like that. So yeah, she's totally different. She's very formal. She doesn't like anything unnecessary being added to the report.
No
like, I don't
emotions,
care about the weather. Like, don't say that next time. Just just say the necessary part.
That's so funny.
And he tries to be like, oh, come on. But anyway, it makes for some interesting dialogue as you're just running from this place to this place, which I think is nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't have any other notes until we get to the desert area.
Oh, me
with
neither.
Adam and Eve.
Me neither. Yeah.
Okay, so
well, I just have the mythology, I guess.
Yeah, that's basically what I wrote here. So that's my next note.
Perfect.
So this is the first of, like I was saying earlier, many different sort of little animated sequences where these are narrated by 9S, and he's giving you some background on culture, lore, mythology, personalities, personal motivations of different machines.
Maybe history. But it's hard to read it all as strictly historical.
Yes.
But there is some element of historicity to what he's saying.
Yeah.
Although it's primarily conveyed in a way that's narrative or mythological.
Right. And again, I feel like this is, though we've gone back in time to 9S at the beginning of the game now, this is end of the game 9S narrating something after he's become a part of the machine network. To just add some context to this place, because 9S, the character running around that we're controlling, can't give us that context yet because he hasn't done the hacking or the integrating yet.
Yeah, good point.
So that's kind of how I read these, right?
I like that.
So this first one is, once long ago a volcano erupted. From the fires of the eruption a god emerged. One day the god appeared before the machines and said, consciousness, pain, joy, misery, fury, shame, desolation, the future, the meaning of life. This one, of all of these, I was like the most sort of confounded by.
Yeah, me too.
It gives off an air like it's doing some kind of symbolic storytelling or something like that.
And
or
it's
it has
showing these pictures with these images that seem like they should be archetypal in some way, But they're actually kind of hard to read and interpret.
As it goes on, it just becomes more obvious that he's kind of just giving you some little piece of context behind. My favorite one, for instance, was the sea Goliath, the Leviathan
that was
robot.
I like that one.
Where they contextualize that to be, this thing's actually a child, as far as its, I don't know, personality or experience or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it felt like it was trying to help and do its best, but like, because it's this giant monster wreaking havoc everywhere, it's like, oh my gosh, it's too dangerous, we got to seal it away, but it's just this little child. Yeah. So this one, I felt like, okay, there's probably this like sort of under the surface sort of meaning to this.
Yeah.
But really, now that I look at it in context of the others, I think this is just a religion or some mythology created by the machines.
Oh, sure.
To sort of
retroactively explain something.
Their origins or their culture or something like that. This is not like a true event that happened necessarily. But I don't know. I couldn't really pull anything more than that.
Even then, why would they pick a volcano?
I don't know.
It's interesting to note too that all of these little vignette scenes take place around something that is directly relevant to that.
Yes,
like we'll see one a little bit later that's about like a baby king, basically.
Right.
We see the Leviathan one. We see one that might be Adam holding a knife, talking about having killed his parents. We see a bunch of these, and this one This one's just more general. I think this is more of like an introduction, like going way back, But, like, why was it? And they're saying basically that the God that appeared talked to them and said that consciousness, pain, joy, misery, fury, shame, desolation, the future, and then it says the meaning of life. But I almost wonder if it's saying that all of those things are the meaning of life, right? And it's saying, hey, you don't have life unless you have these things. And it's all the feelings, it's all the emotions, it's all of the six senses and, things like that, the third eye stuff.
I also wonder if maybe this is sort of representative of the machines themselves. Maybe as they're becoming more conscious, or as they're at least trying to. Yeah. You think of like humankind, like at whatever sort of gradual point between the apes coming out of the trees and then in an agricultural society, was there a period in which they started to actually have the capability to think about their origins and the meaning of life and the purpose and all of that, and that was probably embodied in a religion first.
Probably.
Right? Okay, the concept of God. We were created by something. Right. It came down and gave us purpose. And this is like the machine version of that sort of
version of something
origins
like that.
Of their, not consciousness, because consciousness doesn't necessitate higher thinking, but the origins of their higher thinking, resulting in a religion and like trying to come up with some kind of meaning to life.
I would say that a volcano, something erupting from a volcano, it suggests that it came from the earth, right? So from the earth itself, that God came up upon a mountain from the earth, right? Which is interesting because most people would say that God came down, right, from above. They're saying no, God. It seemed like God didn't exist, and then the volcano erupted and God showed up there. Now, there's a few ways that maybe something like this can happen. One of them is like the awe and the beauty. Like it could be that was the moment where they saw a volcano erupt from a distance, and it was just like a picture of like some, what would you call it? Just some like horrific beauty that they had just seen. That was just like completely overpowered them, and that made them feel like they just like witnessed a connection with like something transcendent, right?
Sure,
and so it was like, oh my gosh, this is it, right? And also, but there's more to it than just that. But it would be like something essentially emerging from the earth. It says emerged, right? That something from the fire, a god emerged. And fire is heat and light, and that's basically what fire is.
Yeah.
But you see the light on top of a mountain, right? This is like with Moses, like when he gets the Ten Commandments, there's like a lightning storm that's happening. Right. It's all like fiery and stuff. And so you get something very similar there. But I feel like maybe just something that can evoke that feeling, that response, at least in humans, is seeing something that's just so awesome, I guess, in lots of different ways that you just like there's something here. Like I just experienced something big.
Yeah.
And it's almost like the awakening of the robots, that something like that just kind of triggered this realization that like, whoa, we're in the presence of something. Like the ability to recognize beauty when you see it is strange, right? It's an interesting thing that humans possess and that other animals do too, I think. But it's almost something that just like when it happens, it just happens. I was whenever I drive past a nice sunset or something, I point it out to my kids, and I'm just thinking like, at what age did I actually look at the sunset and deeply appreciate it?
Yeah.
I don't think I was their age. So my kids are probably just looking out, just like, oh, cool, it's like orange or whatever. And they're like, no, look at it. Look at this. This is something that's cool. This is like part of the essence of like what it means to be a human, I will say, is to appreciate beauty in one form or another, right? And do it now. But you can't like put that into somebody. They kind of have to have their own like enlightenment. Like a light switch has to turn on where they just all of a sudden they realize they're in the presence of something truly beautiful.
Yeah.
And that was what Plato said. The true, the good, and the beautiful are like the three pillars of like transcendent experience, basically.
Yeah.
For the human.
This kind of also plays a little bit into Immanuel Kant, whose book, what was it called? I think it's like
Critique of Pure Reason. I read it 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a really long book.
Sort of a similar premise there, where like the essence of the human experience, more or less, is our ability for reasoning, right? To be able to interpret this universe around us.
And that humans are uniquely positioned to be capable of reasoning.
Right.
Nothing else seems to be able to do that.
Right. So that's sort of part of, like you're saying, the essence of what it is to be human. Yeah. Since we're, as far as we know, the only animals on this planet that can do that.
Yeah.
But also that, there's the idea of the thing in and of itself, regardless of our interpretation of what it means, which can be very flawed, right?
And the idea being that you really never get to actually see the thing in and of itself.
Yes.
Right? It's so hard. Yes. Especially if it's something you've already seen before, you're never going to recreate that first experience of seeing it again.
Right.
Right. And it will always be colored by your memory of the previous time you encountered it.
Right. And so this kind of plays into not only the robots or machines seeing this volcanic eruption and trying to interpret it, right? But that could have been very similar to what happened in real, like, prehistory humans, right? Where they see a natural disaster of that kind, which is simultaneously horrific and awe-inspiring.
Yeah.
And going, why did that happen?
Like, that's crazy.
God must be angry. Or whatever their interpretation of a volcano erupting is, right? Yeah. Which is, it's their interpretation. It's not the thing itself.
You're right. They're seeing, essentially, and this is like the Hermetic idea that as within, so without, right? That the forces of the outside world interact in a similar manner to the forces inside of yourself, right?
Yeah.
So that there's the god of Eros or whatever that's like, fighting over your heart, but then there's also the god of Eros that is just influencing the whole world, right? There's like a dual aspect to those things. And that if something crazy happens on Earth, it's got an analogy within you, right? Yeah. That something like that can happen within you or your group or something like that. There's like this really, I find it fascinating, but at least in part because an organism that an organism that comes from nature will have nature in it, right? Like it has to be, right? Nature can't produce something that it possesses qualities that the nature itself did not have. Right. So it eventually, something like that is more or less correct. Right. But another really interesting idea that I had, because we talk about a volcano erupting and how crazy that is. Well, thunderstorms are crazy, right?
Yeah.
And the like highest god of every pagan society, like all of them, was essentially the thunder god. And in fact, the word for god in Japanese is like kami. Lightning is kaminari, or thunder. Actually, I can't remember. Probably thunder. Anyways, kaminari means thunder. And it means to become God, basically, kaminari. Anyways, so the idea of, and then of course Baal was the lightning god, Marduk and Zeus and Thor, and like it goes on, right? Like the lightning gods are the ones and then a volcano is essentially like a mega lightning event, right? It's like, because they already thought of lightning as fire. So now all of a sudden, you've got the cloud of smoke, right, that comes out of the volcano, and you've got the pillar of fire, essentially. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is like a super mega event. And you can see how you can interpret that, but you have to have the capacity of the things outside are the same as things inside in the first place I feel like in order to develop that just in the first place, like in order to have that realization. Specifically because humans seem to be the only animals that do this. We are not the only ones that see volcanoes.
Right.
But we are the only ones that look at a volcano and think,
God
whoa,
is pissed at
I
us."
just experienced something crazy. He's either pissed at us, or he's pissed at them, or he's pissed at the earth, or the earth is pissed at God, or whatever it is, right? But humans seem to be uniquely the only ones that really do this, that ascribe meaning to things like that. And I can't say that they're totally wrong, because we are products of the environment that does do these things.
Sure.
Right? So anyways, it's really, really, really cool. I think it's fascinating.
We're going to talk more about Immanuel Kant in a little
good.
bit, because there is a character named after Immanuel Kant in this game. It's very easy to miss. It's the Forest King, the baby, the little Forest King baby is Immanuel. So,
Emmanuel.
yes.
Why did I not? I probably thought that Emmanuel was more of a relation to Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
find a babe in swaddling clothes and name
that's
him
the hard
Emmanuel,
thing
right?
about
It was in the Old
a
Testament.
one name instead of two name thing. Like,
Yeah.
the DeBeauvoir or Simone is easier.
I know Simone.
Jean Paul's a little easier, I guess.
Sort of,
But
yeah.
like when it's just a one name thing, even Engels. But
Emmanuel.
Engels is a last name. But I believe that
I didn't catch the Immanuel Kant one.
is supposed to be Immanuel Kant. And I'll go over why I think
'Kay.
that reference is made when we get there.
I'm
But
excited for that then.
I took note here as you're going through the old apartment complex in the desert.
This is another one too. This is great. Okay, so in that image, right? They kind of show the mountain, and then they show like a god type figure that's like this dark shadow with like two eyes, like standing over the mountain. But they also have this what would you call it? The wires, the connection, right? A bunch of lines, basically, going, and they mostly are like right angle lines and things like that, because
Like
it's
the
like
machine
machines.
network.
Yeah, like the network. But it's showing that all of these lines from the machines are basically going into that being right there, right?
Like the god that came out of the volcano.
And they are all connected in something that you could approximate to essentially the collective unconscious, like their network, how they're all kind of connected that way. That it's something like that. And so they have this like, all these machines together being networked together essentially created like a hyper machine, right? Like a hive mind, something like that, that probably would seem to kind of have its own agency, right? That can kind of make its own choices, being the distributed cognition of all of the machines together, creating like essentially like a hyper entity.
Well, that's kind of what
they
Adam
could essentially
and Eve
be.
are.
Yes,
right?
yes, and then that thing is what births Adam, essentially. But it's like their god, essentially, something like that.
That makes sense. So that's why it would come in this section of the game.
Yeah.
As a representation of sort of like
because we're about to get into that.
a leader or god that sort of is at the top of the hierarchy of this machine network, which otherwise is everyone else is kind of on an equal plane, I guess. I don't know. And there was somebody who was asking earlier, is this the first time that the birth of Adam and Eve, is this the first time that there has been this sort of attempt by the machine network to create a sort of leader or someone who's in control or a hierarchy of some kind? And maybe this story
they had it just wasn't embodied.
Yeah.
It was just in the cloud, so to speak.
Yeah. Or maybe there had been, and you know, because mythologies, the stories change and the details are changed or lost along time. Maybe there
on what they're
was
trying to convey.
a machine that was kind of like this in the past, and now the story of that machine is, it was a god that came from the volcano.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
But that might not be the reality of what it
Right.
really was or something, you know. There's a lot of ways to read this or interpret it. There's no concrete answers. It's pretty vague, but...
Oh, yeah. But then their eyes, the camera like pulls back, and the images show like the enlightenment. Essentially, the eyes light up.
Oh,
but
yeah.
not just the eyes. Like there's like a hole in the heart, too.
The heart. Mm.
So it's like they gain vision and a heart, right?
Consciousness.
And that's like, yeah. That's the singularity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I took some notes here on some of the things the robots say to you that I didn't get the first time. I don't know if this is different than in A playthrough or if I just didn't hear these in A playthrough. But you're kind of going through like the apartment complexes and you have machines saying things like, you not people, and hello, how are you today?
Really?
Nice weather, things like this.
Where?
And they're, as you're going through like the desert apartment complexes down to where Adam and Eve are.
Interesting.
They're not hostile. And they're saying things like "nice weather," "hello, how are you today?"
Nice.
But back
Okay, that
in the
makes sense.
desert area before you got into there, they attacked you and said all the things we talked about in an earlier episode. So anyway, I just kind of took note of that. I thought it was kind of funny. I wonder what makes them choose these words, is what 9S says in response to some of that stuff. It's just like, why are they saying this stuff, right? Now we know the answer, but we're back at the beginning of the game.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's all I've got until the amusement park even. So if you have anything,
I got a little bit.
It's
more that upon a second playthrough, it appears as though Eve emerged more from the stomach of Adam than from his ribs.
the side, yeah.
Now it's, flesh of his flesh, right? This is flesh of my flesh. That still holds, and it's close, but I think it's probably saying something important about the stomach, right? This could be the chakras or the kundalini or the and the lower ones closer to like the stomach. Those do represent the more instinctual emotional behavior, right? Like the just digestion and hunger and things like that. And that's kind of represented by those lower chakras. Yeah. And then the higher ones are the heart and the head and,
that's
the spirit.
That's where you get your enlightenment.
Yeah. So if Eve is going to be more of the instinctual, kind of raw emotional, the not conscious or not, just like the primordial feelings of Adam, it would make sense that she comes out of his stomach. Yeah. Which is very interesting. And then the network, I think that's the moment that the network got split, right? It was like in that moment right there. The network splits. Adam then becomes one thing and Eve becomes another thing, but that was not the case early on.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Maybe the boss you're fighting before it splits isn't necessarily Adam either. It's whatever they were
both
as they were a combined being.
Because I brought up like the Orphic egg and Plato's idea of like the four-armed, four-legged people that would be essentially the hermaphroditic like first humans. But in Kabbalah, there's also the idea of Adam Kadmon. And Adam Kadmon was kind of like both, was male and female. It was a similar thing. So Adam Kadmon would be the precursor to Adam, from which then Adam derives, and then Eve, as well. They kind of split.
We talked about this in Xenogears with the Cadmoni and all that.
Yeah.
But
that was great.
Adam Kadmon. Anything else?
No, just the pods. I love what they give us. Pods here.
Yeah.
It's just great. The way that the pods talk is very efficient. Yeah. That's what I'll say.
They start exchanging data. Yeah. Hey, proposal, we should be exchanging more data. It would be more efficient. Analysis, I agree.
Yes.
Kind of thing, right?
That's so funny. I love it. And then, we've got our next mythological part. That's
so I got up to the amusement park as my next note.
Okay, so right before that, we get the mythology thing, and it's about the treasures, right? The machines found these treasures.
Yes.
And each treasure had a different shape. And it seems to me that these treasures were found like by the machines being introspective. Like they discovered truths about themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Like these new sentient beings were like, oh my gosh, I have like this love for animals, like that one machine. Like it was something that was discovered about themselves that was probably not necessarily part of their previous programming. So then you get like a heart shape and a spiral shape and like all the different shapes. Some of the shapes are bad. Some of the shapes are good.
Yeah, so what he says is they were found by the machines. The machines called them treasures.
They found them. I thought that was fascinating.
Each treasure had a different shape. Each treasure had a different shape.
And it was something that they,
Yeah, it seems very, very vague at first, but these treasures get brought up again in a later one of these scenes where it clarifies what it means. With
the evil one, basically.
Right. Kind of towards the end of the playthrough, really, but yeah. And then my next note is we actually get to see the name of the boss in the amusement park. If this is Simone, as in Simone DeBeauvoir, right? So we talked a little bit about her in the first episode, and that she was going to be an influential figure. Her book, The Second Sex, was probably influential on some of the themes of the game and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I really struggled to sort of organize my thoughts on this after reading the book. I'm going to try to just keep it simple. But I have a lot in here, a lot of thoughts that I had, but it's not very like organized into a thread that makes a lot of sense yet. So I'm not sure how this is going to go, but I'll give it a shot. Okay. I think it's important to start off with the fact that this character, Simone, which is what you learn as you're going through the fight, was originally just a little machine like all the others, who was seeking the affection, attention of Jean-Paul, just like all those other machines, like the one that wears makeup from the machine village, right?
Yep.
And in order to win his affections, she went further and further and further and further in modifying herself to become beautiful, right? And this is all based on, well, the definition of beauty is all based on what these machines are pulling from the archives of human history.
Yeah.
Those definitions of beauty and what that meant. Yep. So that's kind of like the story of this character. She just went further and further with embellishments and adornments and modifications to her entire self-worth was based on the reciprocal affections of Jean-Paul, who never really ended up reciprocating at all. No matter how hard she tried or how far she went, it just never worked out. So that's sort of just the general, like, wider view of the story behind this character.
Yeah. The stuff she did got increasingly
more
disturbing.
Yeah, more disturbing. Yeah. Adorned with the bodies of
she was
androids.
Adorned, but there was one line here.
And cannibalization of other machines.
Yeah. It was like, if you eat a machine, then you'll become more beautiful. And it's so funny because she goes, that was such a stupid idea. And then the next line was,
did it anyways.
But I did it anyways. Yeah. Like, oh my gosh, that's how desperate she was. And then it was like, oh, well, then you should eat some androids. And so she ate some androids, and then that didn't work. And then she ate some machines. And I almost feel like that's why she got so big. Yeah. Like, there's no digestion here. She's just full of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's read some of the dialogue. So Simone, you get more dialogue because, again, you're hacking. You can actually understand what she's saying. I know I must become more beautiful. Adding lots of adornments will make me beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful. I must be beautiful. More beautiful, more beautiful. I must become more beautiful. She's just obsessed, right? There's also a part of this fight where, and this is more noticeable here on Beat Playthrough, where the camera sort of turns away from Simone. Yeah. And you can't like redirect the camera with the stick to look at her.
Yeah, that's
and she keeps like begging you to look at her, like, look at me, and you can't even turn the camera that way, right? So all of this is sort of building up to sort of the thesis of what this is all about, right? Look at me. Oh, please look at me. I want your eyes to look upon me alone. Have I not become more beautiful? Do these clothes make me look cute? Would he like it if I walked like this? I still don't understand what it means to love someone, but I've made up my mind. I will do whatever it takes to capture his affection.
Whatever it takes.
Long ago, an old machine life form told me something. Beauty is what wins love. But what is beauty? After researching the old world, I finally learned the truth. Beauty is pretty skin. Beauty is stylish accessories. Beauty is looking one's best. I will become beautiful. I will do it for him. That line really struck me. I will do it for him. I will become more beautiful for him. And I'm going to say something about that.
She has offered him tremendous power.
Yes.
Over herself.
Yes. Yes. And this is all part of DeBeauvoir's like feminist view of how men historically subjugated women and sort of dominated them and made them into private property and all this other stuff. And it's impossible to like summarize all those arguments. I'm not even going to try.
In her book.
But this is part of it, right? I once heard tell of a precious jewel far to the east. It was said to be located on a terribly dangerous mountain, but I didn't care. I slipped on cliffs. I fell onto rocks, but eventually I claimed the jewel. Blue stone, brilliant blue. I lost many parts obtaining this jewel. I lost myself, but my wounds are badges. There's a rumor floating among the other machine life forms lately. Devour the body of an android to gain eternal beauty. Such nonsense. It's physically impossible to obtain beauty by consuming an android, but I tried anyway.
Oh, man.
I would try anything. I wanted to vomit, so she hated doing this, but I kept going. It tasted like oil. Not a moment passed where I didn't strive to become more beautiful.
She said, I felt like vomiting.
Yeah, as she was eating.
I know, but she's a robot.
I know.
So it's like eating, that doesn't make sense to eat something.
Yes.
How then does it make sense for her
vomit.
to have a desire to vomit?
Yeah.
That's interesting.
This is all just an emulation. They're just trying to act like humans.
Yeah.
And even that it tasted like oil. Can they taste? Like, do they have taste buds? Do they have tongues? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not a moment passed where I didn't strive to become more beautiful, but he still wouldn't look my way. I even tried to learn what is called a song. Songs can make someone have feelings for you. That's what they say. So I practice every day. I ate more androids. I even ate machine life forms.
Yep, her own people.
But he still won't look my way. He won't look my way. He won't look my way. He won't repeat over and over and over again. He still won't look my way. That's when I realized he cares not for jewels or songs or beauty or appearance or anything else. I cannot win his love. Why have I done this to myself? Meaningless, meaningless, meaningless. I gaze into the mirror. In its reflection, I see only my own. Only my own meaninglessness. And so I scream, someone please look my way. So, this is a touchy subject, and it's personal for other people in my life, so I'm not going to name any names. And I want to precurse all of this by saying I understand that I have no place and there is no intention here to speak on behalf of women. So really, I would say what I hope that will happen here is that we do have women that watch our channel. I just don't think they speak up as often in the comments, maybe. They did on certain games when we called out to them. We're like, hey, we want a female perspective on this.
There were several.
And then they started talking more. So I'm inviting for that again, to give more perspective on this. So this is by no means an attempt to explain or mansplain, I guess the position, what it feels like to be an other.
Yeah, in that way.
To be the second sex, not the primary sex in the society. And even though long strides have been made to liberate women, give them more rights, allow them to own private property, that the remnants of that are still going to be problems that we're dealing with today. So please feel free to speak up in the comments. I'm eager to get more perspective on this, because all I could do as I was reading this book was just want to talk to more people and get their feelings on it.
To understand.
And just listen to what other women feel about these things and not really try to educate people on the podcast about it.
On their behalf.
Does that make sense?
No,
So
perfect.
I'm not trying to do that.
Exactly what you're
I'm
saying.
just trying to make it more of a conversation starter and to use what I have observed from the women in my life to sort of get that ball rolling. So I just wanted to say that first. I remember as a teenager, my first girlfriend in high school. And again, I'm really hesitant to do this because I would fear that if she were in the room, she would say, no, that's not true or whatever. And so I'm saying this totally with that caveat to it. What I might be saying, my observation.
It's a perspective.
Yeah, my observation might be completely off about what she really felt or something. But it was just what I observed and what I saw and how I interpreted it. It was strange to me that she didn't seem to have hobbies.
I have noticed
in the sense that my male friends did. Right? We had things that we aspired to, skills that we would learn, whether it's learning instruments, not my mom made me go to piano lessons and learn piano, but I stopped doing that.
Yes, me
because
too.
my mom was teaching me and I didn't like it.
That.
And I said, no, I want to learn guitar.
Right.
I took agency.
Yeah.
to not do what I was told by my mother, and I went and said, no, I want to be a rock star and play guitar instead. And that choice was allowed for me to do. Right.
No.
I did that for many things. I had so many interests and so many hobbies and so many skills I was working on, whether that was writing or filmmaking. We made films all through junior high and high school. It's like almost all we did with our free time was make movies, right? Yeah. And that continued into
now
our professions, right? We're still doing video, storytelling, basketball and sports, just so many different things that were related specifically to skills that I wanted to improve and get better at.
Yeah.
And it came off to me that she had no interest in pursuing those types of hobbies where you're developing skills or developing something that could become a career or something like that. There was almost this, it appeared to me, I'm not saying it appeared to me like a lack of interest in those types of hobbies, and that her hobbies were hanging out with friends,
talking to people,
and shopping.
Yeah, shopping.
And stuff like that.
Sure.
And I was just baffled by it. I was like, I didn't ever actually talk about it with her. It was just something I noticed in my mind.
Right.
Like, why do you not pursue something that would be more a skill or something that would like advance your ability to like contribute to society in a career or a job or something like that? And then as I got older, I started noticing this in other women too, right? It was like I just didn't see the same drive or maybe confidence is a better word. Confidence to like go out, like develop a skill and have hobbies that were related to that. So I say that because that was like my first moment noticing some of the things she talks about in this book. The quote is, "One is not born, but rather becomes a woman."
Yeah.
And she says this in her own words. I was going to copy down the text directly, but now I'm just going to read it and silence this video. She says, "Yes, that expression really sums up all of my theories, and its meaning is very simple. Being a woman is not a natural fact. It's the result of history. There is no biological or psychological destiny that defines a woman as such. It's history that has constructed her. Firstly, the history of civilization that has led to her current status. And on the other hand, for each individual woman, it's the history of her life, particularly the early history of her childhood, which determines who she is as a woman." That's as far as I'll go with that.
Okay.
But this more or less wraps up like the central thesis of what she's saying, which is she's not making the argument, I guess I should say first, that there's not a difference between, like biologically, between a man and a woman, that in the obvious ways.
Yes, yeah.
Right. But what she is saying is the thing in itself, the Kant thing we're talking about, right? A biologically female human being, the thing in itself is not what we as a society over history determined it was.
Right.
What that was determined is something a woman becomes, not something she's born as. And this plays into also her, because she had a relationship with Jean-Paul Sartre, who was all about existentialism and the essence versus the existence and which comes first, and giving you the ability, the freedom to choose what you are rather than defining what you are by some kind of essence. There was a creator who made me this, and therefore that's what I am, right? And she essentially is taking that and applying it to the fact that that's what our society has done to women. They have made woman into an essence, and they have trained girls to become that.
Yes. Yeah.
But they're not born that way.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense.
Okay.
The reverse is likely true for men as well.
Like, it is
to
true.
be a man is like you're not born a man. You become a man.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's important to point out. That's true. But the difference is that is considered the default human. and the one that has all the power
see.
in the society.
I see. That this does harken back to, I think, Plato or probably actually more like Aristotle considered women to essentially just be like defective men. Is
Yes,
that like
Freud,
something like
Freud
that? Okay.
talked about this, and she was a huge critic of Freud for this.
Yeah.
Because that's essentially what a lot of psychoanalysis at the time was sort of saying.
And if this goes back to Plato and Aristotle, it probably goes back way before them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can just imagine how long this has been the case, right?
Yeah.
Now, and I was going to look into this and I forgot to do it, but I may be totally mistaken, but I'm pretty sure that a fetus, when it is first developing, by default, they're always female first.
I heard that in high school.
Right.
It's been about 20 years.
I just don't know if that's true for sure.
Or is that
Maybe
one
we
of
can
those
look at that real quick.
high school urban legends?
But like, it actually really turns that whole thing on its head, because even in Christianity, it was Eve was the other. She was the second. It was Adam was the primary, right?
Yeah.
And she talks about all of this and how this sort of shaped what a woman is in society. But did you find an answer?
This just says, during early development, the gonads of the fetus remain undifferentiated. That is, all fetal genitalia are the same and are phenotypically female. So the genotype is obviously one chromosome or the other.
Yes.
But the phenotype, the way it's shown, the way we see it, is female.
Yes.
So it looks like female genitalia until the point in the development where the gamete producers either come outside of the body or stay
inside the body.
Yeah.
Right.
So they all stay inside at the beginning.
Whether or not this is exactly the right way to put it, it is ironic.
There is some irony there.
in the religious context, historically, we have seen woman coming from man. Eve came from Adam.
Right.
Adam was the primary. Adam was the first. Eve was the second.
Right.
And that's the whole title of the book, is the second sex, not the primary, but the other, the second one.
Yeah.
The one that has been defined as the lesser or the afterthought or something like that.
Right.
But like biologically speaking, it's almost the other way around.
It would be, yeah, you can see it the other way around. So whatever in evolution, whatever the thing is that finally we can say this is a human and its parent was not a human.
Yes.
I know that's like, people hate talking about that because it doesn't make sense. But at whatever point where you draw the line, that being the first human was a girl inside the womb.
Yes.
Something like that. Girl,
something like that.
Female, whatever.
Yeah. And so it's just...
Fair enough.
So that's kind of like the essence of her point, of her thesis of what she is arguing in the book. And as I was reading it and thinking about it, I remembered all these times in which that's what I was really noticing about the women in my life.
Yeah.
That they were almost tailored, taught, brought up to be, their hobbies were like beauty and dating
and makeup
and relationships and talking about those sorts of things, and were not related to the things I was interested in, which was the development of skills in going out and like bettering myself at things that would, as she puts it, which I've got some more quotes, give me a second. Okay, so there's actually several quotes that are kind of related to this, and I can't remember precisely what. I'm just going to kind of read them, just to give some tastes of what's in this book. It is not in giving life, but in risking life, that man is raised above the animal. That is why superiority has been accorded to humanity, not to the sex that brings forth, but to that which kills.
So this has reference to Adam.
In the game.
In the game.
That's why I took the screenshot.
Oh, good. I was going to say, wow, that's kind of on the nose.
Yeah, it's like, that's what Adam does when he fights to be.
And because that's what he learned, right? He researches all the human things and he goes, whoa, the highest point in society is that which puts his life on the line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's pretty good.
She also writes here, I could not help but comment to my distinguished audience that every question asked of Sartre concerned his work, while all those asked about Beauvoir concerned her personal life.
Oh, I didn't think that's where she was going with that.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess I can't.
Well, that's similar to what we were just talking about. Like the interest of the women that I knew were all talking about the personal life things and the relationships and the dating and the stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I was focused on work I was focused on my work. What am I going to do for a living someday? What do I want to become? What do I want to go out there and like enforce on the world or make a mark on the world? The girls that I knew growing up never talked about this at all.
Didn't Simone, didn't she have a unique personal life, though?
Oh, for sure.
I almost wonder if there's something there. Like, she was very different in the way she chose to live her life.
Yeah, on purpose.
That certainly invites some questions.
Or skepticism or whatever.
Sure, yes. Yeah. Whereas if Jean-Paul were to receive questions about his personal life, it would likely be about, hey, what's that girl doing that you like?
Yeah.
As opposed to because he was kind of just doing his own thing, right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
But there could be more you read into that too, whereas like, is it weird for a woman to live this way because that's what we have been raised to think, like women shouldn't be acting or behaving in this way, but it's like more acceptable for a man, or maybe just not as
true.
Strange.
That one's true, because if the man was going around sleeping around, it's not as big a deal.
No.
If the woman is having her own way, society is a lot tighter on that.
She talks about this all the time in the book too, about sexuality and how religion in particular really like put a clamp on that for women in a way that they did not for men. And why, and
the why, it's not just doctrinal. It would also be biological, right?
This is not related to what I was getting to. Sorry, I tried to warn you guys. My thoughts on this are not super organized, but this is also just kind of in relation to something we were talking about last week. Few tasks are more like the torture of Sisyphus than housework.
Ooh.
With its endless repetition. The clean becomes soiled. The soiled is made clean over and over, day after day. The housewife wears herself out, marking time. She makes nothing, simply perpetuates the present, eating, sleeping, cleaning. The years no longer rise up towards heaven. They lie spread out ahead, gray and identical. The battle against dust and dirt is never won.
Whereas, no, she's avoiding the raising of children here, but if you're just talking about cleaning,
she talks about that too, though.
Okay.
Because
when she says they create or they make nothing, it's like I don't know about that.
But this is how a man, in her view, separates himself from an animal, right? A man hunted and went out and created technology and and so then took ownership of things, right, and private property and all that stuff.
Oh yeah.
But a woman's role in society was child rearing, which an animal can do.
Oh, I see.
So,
okay, fair enough.
So a woman is not able to transcend in the way that a man is in the society, because her role is simply reduced to what any animal can do, whereas men are going out and becoming more than that.
It's the more instinctual, more baser nature kind of.
Right.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, she does touch on that in other places in the book. Okay. There's just too much. There's too much. I'm going to put this away for a second.
Okay.
And try to like round out my point here and bring it back to the game a little bit.
And then I want to read a little bit that Mix sent me earlier about somebody who wrote a biography of DeBeauvoir.
Okay, cool. The point is that even beyond my high school girlfriend, women that I knew after that, my own family members, whether it be cousins, my sister, my mother, whether it be other women that I've met in social situations at work, or other groups that I was a part of, or whatever it might be, eventually other girlfriends. I started to notice in different ways sort of similar patterns where it's just like the what they took interest in seemed to be really different in a way that confounded me or puzzled me. And I didn't understand. Like, why is it that you don't seem to have the same drive that I have to develop yourself in the ways that I'm doing it, which happen to advance my career and happen to give me skills that make me a more valuable or asset to a company, or useful to contributing to society in the workplace. And the things you focus on tend to not do that. And is this natural? Is this just the way women think versus the way men think? And there's
nature nurture, right?
That's the whole argument, and that's
probably
really
both. Probably
what
both.
it boils down to. And a lot of what her argument is that this is more nurture. She's saying it's not nature, and that's part of the existentialist view, is that there isn't an essence, right?
Oh, right. That's a good point.
That you're made into what you become, and that men typically have more choices, not just in what they're literally in the law allowed to do. It used to be more that way, where women were private property. They were not allowed to own. They were not allowed to own land. They were not allowed to vote. Those things have opened up more so in modern times. But there's something more than that. It's not just like what you're literally allowed or not allowed to do. It's what society has sort of guided you or taught you is what you should be interested in pursuing versus what you should be interested in pursuing. And this is done in very subtle ways, psychological ways, from early on in childhood through, corporate campaigns, marketing campaigns, and all sorts of things that factor into you're watching commercials as a child, and the ones for boys are obviously very different than the ones that are for girls. And I guess my point is that I didn't really connect it until now, that there was probably a lot more nurture in what I had been observing about the women in my life growing up than I wanted to accept, or that she just likes this, I guess, and this is what she's into, rather than that might have been something that she became. And one person in particular I won't name on the podcast, just because, again, I'm kind of afraid that I don't want to speak for anybody.
Be careful.
She told me specifically about how much she felt like her life changed in puberty. It was as soon...
women go through a bigger... That's true.
It was as soon as menstruation started.
Yeah.
This became something that, that made me different from the boys in the class.
Right.
Something that, they're disgusted by, I can't talk about, I can't be open about. Something that weakens me. Something that my hormones are changing. The boys start going through puberty, they're getting stronger in their puberty.
Right.
And this is something she calls out directly, is puberty, child rearing, and just biological sex being a huge factor beyond the societal sort of domination of women, and the fact that they couldn't own land and all those things that Engels talked about. She's it goes deeper than that. It's way deeper than that, for the reasons why women had a lesser place, why they were the second in society. And as this person was explaining this to me, I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I'm reading in the book. You're basically telling me your experience through puberty is exactly what she was saying in the book, changes a girl into a woman, the woman of society's view of woman. And as a girl, she had dreams. As a girl, she felt confident. As a girl, she had all of this, what's the word I'm looking for? Positivity in terms of hope about the future. And that started to be whittled down through puberty. And that was just something that I never ever could understand what that's like, because obviously I didn't go through it, right? It was totally a different experience. And so anyway, as this boils back down to the game, what struck me about Simone here is that the object of her obsession is to do all of this for a man.
Yeah.
And I have also noticed that about other women that I know. It's the object of what they pursue is all in relation to marriage, family, and that's it. It's that's what they really care about. And I always thought that must be because it's in their nature to be, it's in their essence to be that way. And there's a part of me that's starting to realize, based on other conversations I've had recently, that might not be as much the case as I once thought. And it's really made me reconsider a lot of things. And it's particularly if I become a father and I have a daughter, and the way that I would go about making sure, that they get a choice in what they become. rather than being molded into something, becoming the second sex. Does that make sense?
Yes, as somebody with a daughter, I do. I know what you mean. It's so funny. I watch her go to kindergarten. Right, I'll drop her off sometime. Usually my wife does it, but I'll drop her off. She'll run in, and she's so friendly with the boys. The boys are so friendly with her, and I have this thought where I'm just like, you all can be friends until you're, I don't know, when did girls stop becoming friends with boys?
Right.
Like, when did that happen? Like
puberty.
11-ish?
It's puberty.
Yeah, 11.
It's puberty for girls.
And
that's when it happens.
There's a point where it's like, it's going to get really awkward for you two to just like be this friendly. And like, I don't think there's anything you can do about that, right? There's just the sexual tension just like shows up, and it makes people act weird, and boys stop hanging out with girls as much unless it's like, romantically and, as they get older. But girls think boys are gross and boys think girls are gross. And that happens around like, I don't know, maybe like late elementary school. And then, but it's just funny to see how my daughter is with the boys in her class right now. They're so nice to her. They all get along great. They all don't see each other's differences at all.
Yeah.
And really, there aren't that many. For children, it's like they're not that different. It's puberty when they really become different. And when my daughter goes through that, first off, I don't think I'm going to have a ton of influence on her.
Yeah.
Like once she's that age and it's like, ooh, and she'll start talking to me about whatever she's talking about, like I won't really have influence on her at that point. It'll be too late, essentially. So it's like when they're younger, you do that more, but at the same time, it's just make sure that they know that they can do anything. My daughter, she actually came home from kindergarten a few weeks ago, and she goes, "Hey, Daddy, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a mommy, I'm going to be a scientist, and I'm going to be an artist." I was like, good for you. I don't know anyone who can do those things, all three, like that's professionally, like top.
Is the motherhood part. Right?
That one just it'll either win out
careers,
or it'll be sacrificed to the other things.
And that's a whole part of her point too. Is that childbirth?
It kills careers, but it gives the human race. It continues existence.
Yeah,
and
I don't think she's ever trying to diminish how important that is.
Good.
As much as it is to say that this is a factor in why women were seen as the second or the other, whereas the men were going out doing the hunting and the creating.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah,
they're regulated to this. They have to. They have to take that role if the species is to continue. Men don't have to, and so there's an inherent difference that creates an inequality based purely on the biological sex.
Right.
That's where she's saying she's going deeper than Engels and Marx did, right? Because I can't go work. I just had this kid. I have to take care of it.
Yes.
And that means
that becomes
I'm going to hire a
priority.
man instead of you because he won't have to step out of the workplace.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
That's the point.
Yep.
So
that is true.
There was something else I was going to say about Immanuel Kant, the essence, or the essence of humanity, or the thing in itself.
Oh, right.
You look at the difference between boys and girls versus men and women, but boys and girls, outside of, I guess, the obvious physical, difference, there's not that much difference. Like
when they're young,
yeah. Their voices are both high pitched.
Although I still gotta say,
tons of energy.
My daughter, she is young, but she's already starting to notice that.
Yeah,
she's like, she tells me, she goes, "I don't want to play boy games. Like boy games are where people get hurt."
Yeah,
she's like 5, so it's like, oh geez, this starts pretty young, I guess.
Right.
She's still in that stage where she can be friends with them, but when they start playing their games, she's out. She's gonna go find some girls to play with.
But let's step back even further. What's like the real essential difference outside of biological sex to an infant baby boy and an infant baby girl?
Yeah, basically.
Otherwise, what's the difference?
Basically.
They act almost exactly the same.
And when did this happen? It was probably when she was like 3 or 4 that started to become a thing. I started noticing her not really hanging out with like, playing with. She'll hang out with the boys to talk.
Yeah.
But she won't play with them as much.
And
it was around 3 or 4.
And so the question is that already starting? Is the nurture that is splitting the difference already happening at that young of an age, right?
For my daughter, I don't think so. I am I'm very good. I'm very good with her. My daughter's she's gonna have.
Well, it didn't have to be you. It could have been other people. It could have been the TV.
Well,
it could
it's
have
just
been
the way that she sees. That's true.
Yeah.
But she just doesn't want to get hurt. When the boys are playing, she gets hurt, and she just doesn't want to.
I see what you're saying.
Like
I don't, the rough play.
Exactly.
Kind of thing.
That's more when I mentioned that she's like, I'm going to go find some girls. It's when the boys start, and she's slowly caught on to the pattern. It just inevitably happens. The boys, it may start fun, but the boys are going to start bringing in monsters and swords and dragons, and she just wants to play like house or something like that.
Yeah, but like, when did those boys decide that they wanted to play monsters and swords and dragons?
Pretty early on. I can't wait till you have kids. It's early, dude.
How did that...
I don't know.
Did they come into the world wanting to play swords and dragons, or did they see it and go, "That's cool, I want to emulate that"?
Yeah,
that's the hard to answer question here.
I'm on the nurture end, or sorry, I'm on the nature end of that one. Having had kids, it seems pretty clear to me that this is just like what happened. In fact, this is my brother Landon, who a lot of people on this channel will be familiar with. I'm going to bring him up next episode because we're going to have to end soon.
Yeah, we're going to end soon.
But he and his wife were trying their absolute hardest to make sure that there was not going to be any gender expectations on their kids.
Okay.
Very hard. They really tried to push. I don't want to make it sound like they were pushing or anything. They tried to be very open and free. Like give the girls some cars, give the boys some Barbie dolls, and just they both would watch the same very modern television. And so none of that was really there. Their son is as masculine a boy as you could ever, and their daughter is the most princess little girl in the world. And and you talk to them and they're just like we really tried to not let this happen, and it just kind of happened. Yeah, and those are who my kids play with too. Sure. And so that boy is part of the reason why my daughter is kind of like, he's a boy. He's such a boy, right? But I just want to say that because of course I wasn't as I just whatever. I didn't try to guide them towards. I didn't try to guide my daughter towards more masculine things, and my sons towards more feminine things. Although my son sometimes wears the Frozen dress from Elsa. Right. Right. He thinks it looks cool. It's got a jewel in there. All right, we got a ton of pictures of him in a dress. Yeah. But it seemed to me to be quite the nature winning over nurture. In these cases.
Yeah, I want to make something else clear too. Is because this happens sometimes on the podcast. People are watching and they tend to start assuming.
I know. I've been trying to No, I brought in my own family. Yeah, that's obviously my personal opinion. But yeah, I've been trying to be as objective as I can about DeBeauvoir.
Yeah. So they tend to start assuming sometimes, you must be one of those woke people, or the opposite.
Or what's the opposite?
People have assumed
trad
have assumed our politics or whatever so many times in the comments. It's been kind of baffling to me.
It's almost always wrong. Yeah,
and I'm not saying, by far from it, that I've been perfect in my ability to be as objective as possible when bringing up conversation starters, which is all this podcast is. This is not a place to make declarative statements and be like, hey, this is right and this is wrong, because I just don't believe that in general. I don't believe I really know.
Ooh, that is wise.
Most of anything that I'm talking about, really.
Socrates would say that you are a wise man.
Of course I have opinions, and I'm about to clarify some of that now so that you'll understand that just because I'm trying to make the arguments for DeBeauvoir doesn't mean I agree with everything she said.
It doesn't mean that you want to go further than Engels.
Yes. Though she did open my eyes to a lot of things.
That's good.
I don't agree with everything that was written in there, and I do tend to believe a lot more in nature. I just think
biology, right?
There's just a lot of things in terms of things I've inherited, clearly inherited from my family, and you could make the argument that was nurtured. I was in my family; they taught you to think this way. Yes, but I think there really is quite a lot of both, and there's the good reason why there's good arguments for both, and it's really hard to know when it is nurture and when it is nature. Yeah. But I do think that there is nature that plays a part in why boys are the way they are and why girls are the way they are, or why sometimes boys are more feminine, and why there's a biological explanation for that. That's in nature too. That's not just a nurture thing, as some people on the other side might try to argue. But your brother and your sister-in-law are a good example where they tried to be open and it turned out that way.
They tried.
So
bless them.
The point is, I'm not trying to say one is right or wrong, because we don't know. We just don't fetch a no.
No, it's too complicated. I think you're just saying that like you want to make room to add in or to be open to.
I want to be
bring
open
a little more of that in
to the fact that these girls that I grew up with, who I thought it was in their nature to be obsessed like about boys and kids and getting married and having families and looking pretty and going on dates, and that seemed to be the only thing they cared about. There might have been more nurture in that than I thought.
And if that's the case, correct.
If that's the case, that's probably something we should address, because that is keeping women at a disadvantage to men in the workforce. That really is holding them back from a destiny they choose versus one that they were born and bred to think was their destiny as a woman. And I don't like that at all, because I don't have that stipulation. I was allowed to tell my mom, no, I'm not playing piano. I'm going to play an electric guitar. How many girls, I don't know the answer to this.
You have a sister.
Yeah. How many girls felt like they couldn't make that assertion and make that choice to say, no, I'm not going to play piano, Mom. No, I'm not going to do the things that are expected for me to do as a girl, Mom. I'm going to do this instead because I want to pursue this. That is just, I feel, historically, it's indisputable, was not a choice given to girls and women.
True.
And that has to still remain to some degree in the society that evolved from that one.
Oh, totally. Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep, totally.
Okay. That's where we're going to have to leave off.
But I got one thing. I'm going to read this quote from Mix, and we're just going to leave it to the comment section for this one. So Mix, Beast in the YouTube comments, you guys should read all of his stuff, because he posts like these essays, like 4 or 5 of them.
A lot of them. And really a lot of them come from what is written here in our
on
chat.
The Discord,
when we're live
on
doing
Patreon.
this. Yeah,
yep. Right. Exactly. So he sent this thing. It's somebody who wrote a biography about DeBeauvoir. And so I'm just going to give you a few, but it's basically talking about DeBeauvoir like developed this desire to like consume things and was never really sated.
Sure.
Right. And this says her appetite extended to collecting things, including many gifts and souvenirs from her travels. When she finally moved from hotel rooms to a proper apartment in the 50s, it quickly filled up with jackets and skirts from Guatemala, blouses from Mexico, once again, clothes and things. Yeah. I went to Mexico. I didn't bring back any clothes. I'm just saying.
Nope. Okay. I think I brought back like sunglasses and like a lighter or something
or like
that.
Like a little cool little gadget or something. Things from then some like tom-tom drums from that Sart had brought back. I'm sorry. Okay. That's just okay. I don't mean to. That was unexpected. Okay. Anyways, so she brought a whole bunch of things back from these places, and it says that her diary keeping and her memoir writing also reflected an urge to acquire and relish everything that came into her grasp. These descriptions of the earnestness of DeBeauvoir for life and her desire to ingest, I think, map well to the devouring aspect of her character in NieR Automata. Those last words were Mixes. But yeah, this is basically DeBeauvoir had this desire to just devour and to like consume everything, and not just in like a destructive way. Like she was trying to incorporate it into her being. She found all these cool things from all over the place, and she was like, she wanted, like in a perennialist sort of way, she wanted that. Oh, I like that from this culture. I like that from this culture. And she was like collecting these things so that she could make, like, I'm sure that there are some cultures that are a lot more matriarchal, that she probably was like, I really think that's cool. I'm going to adopt some of those beliefs as my own.
Yeah.
And but you're consuming. That's a version of consuming, when you do that.
Yeah.
And so she kind of had this air about her of wanting to consume and consume. That's very relevant to DeBeauvoir, or to Simone here in NieR Automata,
game, for sure.
So thank you for that Mix.
Yeah.
And
we appreciate you, all the stuff that you add to it. So
so
yeah, that just kind of leaves off on this section. That's some of the ideas that were worked into this character. why it was designed the way it was, why she's obsessed with Jean-Paul's affection. Hopefully that all that jumbled mess that I kind of tried to get through to explain it kind of came around and made more sense of this boss and why it's designed the way it is and what its treasure was, right? The treasures we're talking about. And
really, as she is embodying this purely cultural, completely nurtured, because as a robot, there isn't much nature there. It's all learned from the
archives of human.
So history, as she embodies purely the nurture aspect of the current culture, she's pitiful, and there's no other way to say it.
Yeah.
Partly because she failed. Like, if she actually got Jean-Paul, then I probably wouldn't be saying how pitiful she is.
Yeah, right.
But you see this whole thing of her trying to live in this purely, like, deeply encultured way that isn't natural to her at all, but that she's adopted, and that it is more or less the customs that we grew up in, right?
Yes.
And you see it put on a robot in its entirety, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's first off, that's a horrible burden for her to she more or less put it on herself, but she felt the need to put it on herself, you know, and it's kind of scary, right?
Yeah. And I guess
it's pitiful. It's just pitiful.
Well, what you just said, even because you're like, well, if she had, let's say she had won Jean-Paul's affection, I think it still is.
Yeah.
Because the only thing that validates her is the affection of this man, not what she goes out and creates herself. And this is the difference between a lot of men and women. And again, a lot of the women I've observed in my life, they feel like their self-worth is wrapped up in, can I find a man and get married? Not in, I'm going to be the best filmmaker, or I'm going to write this awesome story, or I'm going to go out there and design this new piece of technology that's going to change people's lives. You know what I mean? Yeah. There's so many women that their minds aren't even there at all.
Right.
And Simone's mind is totally obsessed with the affection of Jean-Paul, not with what she can go out and create and do and become as an individual with her acting with her agency, without the need for another's affection. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And that's another thing I noticed too with other people, with other women in my life, is I always sort of defined my own success or my own self-worth based on what I was accomplishing. I kind of have a problem with the need to like finish and accomplish things. And I get real, almost like, I get real flustered and frustrated and anxious when there are projects left unfinished. I love accomplishing and doing and growing and becoming better at skills or in learning things. And I was noticing these other women in my life or other girls in my life who they defined their self-worth in a totally different way. And it was not dependent on what they...
Right. It was dependent on others.
It was on what another person... And that, I think, was huge for me to realize is that's a horrible burden to carry and puts you at a huge disadvantage, I feel. So that's what was going on with this character.
Gotcha.
Is that it?
No. Yeah, I think we can do another episode, you guys.
Yeah. All right. We're going to sign off here, and we are going to do another episode to finish off Route B. And so that's what you can expect next week.
Gotta get there.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you again next week. Peace out.